So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself.
So principle moves us on as we fulfill the parameters of soul. Principle as soul. We come to principle as principle, which says that the proof that you are a self-organizing system, that you are like, coincident with your principle, is your unselfishness. That you furnish proof of your unselfishness. That unselfishness, then, we must see is the beginnings of that unselfed love within us. It is that mind, spirit, and soul become our selfhood. Our selfhood is our self-organization. This is the test of all prayer, she says, and shows really that that test of all prayer is implying within it that we are opening up to our universe. The test of all prayers, of all prayer, lies in the answer to these questions. Here it comes. Here is the crux. Do we love our neighbor better because of this asking? Does your coincidence with the prayer of mind, of spirit, of soul affect in you that you love your neighbor better? That you are opening up to your universe? In other words, how do you relate to your universe? The marginal heading is the summit of aspiration. This is principle as principle. It is the pivot point, the pivotal point within the 7x7 layout. Is it not? The center summit of aspiration, the summit of our aspiring from mind to spirit to soul to principle. And from this point on, then she will show the demonstration of that to which we have aspired, because then the subtones become principle as life, indicating what will come in life, principle as truth, an indication of truth, principle as love, as what we will have in the main tone of love. Do we love our neighbor better? Do we pursue the old selfishness? So there's a countering now of the self-organized system and a system that isn't self-organized yet. We are not yet at the point of self-organization. If there's the old selfishness, if there is the closedness in us that is being closed in the sense of going toward equilibrium, a selfishness that is satisfied with having prayed for something better, just satisfied that one made the effort and said the words, but not giving any evidence of the sincerity of our requests by living consistently with that prayer. Sincerity by being in conformity with that prayer in our lives. So if selfishness has given place to indicates an evolution going on, that something is coming in and taking the place of something else. Given place to kindness, we shall regard our neighbor unselfishly and bless them that curse us. But you can see that this is the working of a Christ principle within us, isn't it? It cannot be a moral effort, a moral attitude, that I must try to love my neighbor better. I must be more kind to my neighbor. I should look at him or her in an unselfish way. I should bless them that curse me. And so with every curse, I try, I grit my teeth and I try not to react in a negative way. I try to be good. And you cannot try to be good and have any success. This is actually something that is off the course, and it has to be corrected. It has to be corrected by the consistency and the coherency of the first 3 prayers, even the 4th prayer, right up to the point of principle as principle. This has to be total field of complexity within us, that we are complexified by those standpoints of the divine nature, and then we find that we actually do look at our neighbor differently, and that in this looking we love that neighbor more, because we have a context. We've been given a context of mind, spirit, and soul, the context that is principled within us. Being principled, of course, it is actually finding its source in the divine principle love, and has the nature of love within it, that love sees where everything belongs. It gives a place value. It gives place to everything within our universe. And so this is an unselfing of us. The selfishness goes out, and we regard our neighbor unselfishly. And she says this great duty cannot be met simply by just asking that it happen. Oh, I hope that will happen. Someday I will love them more. But there is a cross to be taken up. We've taken it up. It's been taken up. It may seem to be a cross to us that needs to be taken up, that principled standpoint of adhering to the course of mind, spirit, soul, principle. Mind, spirit, soul, principle. If we attempt that personally, it seems to be a cross. But as we continue in that, we find that it is our crown, and that we begin to enjoy. We are touching the fruition of the hope and faith that we've had from the start. So this subtone is all to do with the conformity between theory and practice, we might say, and that the true test of the self-organizing system within us is this test of unselfishness, which is really impersonality, the impersonality of principle, a principled attitude, which as mind is what? Shown in the text as a desire, that we must have a desire for unselfishness, a desire for that impersonality. As spirit, that we show forth that unselfishness and impersonality, and that as soul we persevere in that unselfishness and impersonality. Versus the disorganized or unorganized system, which is pursuing the old selfishness, satisfied just with having prayed for something better and giving no evidence of sincerity. Principle as life will show us the conformity between our desire to follow Christ and the actual following of Christ. So we're shown again, given again an example, Christ being the ideal behind Jesus and his life, an example. Jesus is the example of a self-organized system. And we can see that we're given the test, do we measure up with that? And that means to again measure up with mind, spirit, soul, and principle. So as life, the epitome at that point is that we find out whether we are self-organized by seeing if we are willing. Are we willing to leave all for Christ's sake? By being willing to do that, by being willing to follow Jesus' example, and by being willing to go the way of life, even though with bleeding footsteps. So we get a look into where principle is taking us, leading us. It's leading us into life, truth, and love. And here is the indicator for life. Dost thou love the Lord thy God? This is life. Love here is a quality of life. It's the quality of giving all to God. The quality of surrendering all, of laying down everything that is mortal for the divine, for the immortal. So it's, of course, laying down everything that is unlike the first prayer, unlike the second prayer, unlike the third prayer, such that we lay down everything that is unprincipled within us. And what happens then? Let's see what the text says. Dost thou love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind? That's actually what we just said. With all thy mind, the first prayer. With all thy heart, the second prayer. And with all thy soul, the third prayer. This is life. This is life. And this is love, the quality of life within us, to love that principle, to be aligned with it. And this is a form of self-organization. This command includes much, even the surrender of all merely material sensation, affection, and worship. This is the El Dorado of Christianity, the promised land, so to say, of Christianity, the gold of Christianity. It involves the science of life, a beautiful blending of principle and life, the science of life, and recognizes only the divine control of spirit, in which soul is our master, and material sense and human will have no place. So again, she says, don't forget the science of life, the principle of life, that which is going to bring forth the demonstration of life, is mind, spirit, and soul. To recognize mind, only the divine control of spirit, in which soul is our master. And so material sense and human will go out. So that is our conformity as it is presented initially in the text, and then we see that we are asked several questions. Are you willing to leave? Is now very pointed. Are you willing to leave? Are you willing to leave all for Christ? For that cybernetic idea that you've seen, that you've been looking at this week, that you have been incorporating this week as your self-organization? Are you willing to leave all for Christ, for truth, and so be counted among sinners? And she answers for us, no. There's something in the system that is not self-organized. Do you really desire to attain this point? No, there's still something. Then don't make long prayers about it. Let's begin to see the correction of it, that the correction will be not to make the long prayers about it, not to ask to be Christians, since you don't care to tread in the footsteps of our dear Master. To tread in the footsteps of, so those footsteps are already there. The footsteps very much indicate a way of life, to go along a way of life, the way of life of the Master. And you need to repeat these steps to become cybernetic, to tread in those footsteps, the footsteps that we've been given. Mind, spirit, soul, principle. If unwilling to follow this example, don't pray with the lips, that you may be partakers of his nature. Why? Because consistent prayer, the real prayer, the prayer of a self-organized state of consciousness, is the desire to do right. To do right. So then she goes on in the text. Prayer means that we desire to walk, and will walk in the light so far as we receive it. The light so far as we receive it, with every new subtone we come to further light, and we're expected to walk in that light, in the light that we have. So when we come to principle as truth, we're expected to walk in the light from mind as mind to principle as life. Walking in that light brings in the new light. It's light emitting light. So we desire to walk and will walk in the light so far as we receive it, even though with bleeding footsteps. There's always that sense that perhaps there may be a sacrifice about it, suffering about it. It's a different kind of a suffering than deviating from the course. It's something that comes with adhering to the course. But with the finer and finer adhering to the course, the bleeding footsteps go out. And that waiting patiently on the Lord, waiting for that which is to come, being true to the order, waiting for the order to develop itself, not trying to develop it ourselves, we will leave our real desires to be rewarded by Him, by the divine principle, love. Let's recap the epitome at that point, namely that by being willing to leave all for Christ's sake, by being willing to follow Jesus' example, and by being willing to go the way of life, even though with bleeding footsteps, that this is how we give proof of our isomorphy with principle, our status as a self-organized idea or consciousness. I shouldn't say idea, we are self-organized idea, but for an evolving system, it is a self-organized state, dynamic state of consciousness. So we have gone through most of that tone, and we come to actually line 5 on page 10. And she says there, that she has already told us that the quality within us must be that quality to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind, falling back on mind, spirit, soul, principle, and beginning to indicate what life is, that life is that quality of love, to surrender all, to give all, to lay down all that is of a mortal or equilibrium nature within us for the divine. She says the world must grow. This is a very interesting statement now that comes in. She doesn't say you must grow, the world must grow to the spiritual understanding of prayer. We said that with the main tone of principle, there is the coming in now of the collective and the hinting toward the universal. We had the whole question of our neighbor. Did we love our neighbor? Bringing in a collective sense, whereas the whole focus through the earlier subjects seems to have been on the individual without any relationship. So it will be first on the collective, and then we see how the collective opens up to the universal, and she's somehow indicating that here as she says the world must grow to the spiritual understanding of prayer. If good enough to profit by Jesus' cup of earthly sorrows, what does that mean, good enough to profit? We saw actually last night when we were talking about the using of our talents, that means to profit from, the talents must be improved, I think was the terminology, meaning that if we would improve, if we would utilize what we have been given, our talents, those first 4 subjects now that we have been given, if we use those cybernetically, go back to them, to use them doesn't mean to take them humanly and put them into some kind of use to our own services, but to follow that cybernetic flow, to get into that cybernetic flow and to remain in it. This is profitable. It was Jesus' cup of earthly sorrows. He actually was the ideal of that state of consciousness that adhered to the Christ standpoint, the divine cybernetic idea, and the result was oftentimes an earthly sense of sorrow. But this is life wants to show us this belongs to the way of life, that we need not be fooled by that actually that is a sign that we are on the way of life, and that the sacrifices that are involved are sacrifices that will lead us to the goal, to that divine equifinality of love. And so she says, God, and I hear the whole divine cybernetic principle, love with all that means as the self-feedback principle, will sustain us. We will have the sustenance of life, of being itself, under these apparent sorrows, until we are thus divinely qualified and are willing to drink his cup, to go the same way that Jesus went. Millions of vain repetitions. You can hear the opposite of life, that teeming sense of what is vain, those repetitions that are empty, that doesn't matter how many repetitions you have, if they are empty, they are vain and can never pour into prayer, can never give to prayer the unction of Spirit, the flow of Spirit, in demonstration of power and with signs following. Christian Science reveals a necessity for overcoming, and when I hear overcoming, I hear that Christian Science, overcoming, is the working together of the positive feedback and the negative feedback of our two homeos, the homeostasis and resa, overcoming the world, the flesh, and evil, and thus destroying all error. So it's a great, more general sense at this point of what we overcome as the world, the flesh, and evil. These are great generalities, and thus the destroying of all error. Seeking is not sufficient. Now she really shows the rule of it, or the law of it, and we see that it's the very same thing, that we just keep being brought back to that course. Seeking, yes, we need seeking, but it isn't enough. Life, principle is life, says you must have more. It is striving that enables us to enter. So you hear mind, that we need the seeking, but we also need spirit. We need the striving, that enables us to enter in. Spiritual attainments. So we have a touch of soul. Spiritual attainments. And these three are really the principle within us that open the door to a higher understanding of the divine life. So she's showing what it is that leads to life, that mind, spirit, soul, principle, this alone will lead you to the higher understanding of the divine life. It's always higher and higher and higher that we go. So honest prayer is that which goes the way of life, is surrendering everything that is of a personal nature, everything that is material or sensational in our worship and makeup. And she ends that subtone with a very interesting paragraph. She says, one of the forms of worship in Tibet, it's like this terrific contrast between a divine principle that is so richly self-organized and self-organizing and able to govern itself and govern its universe, and she counters that to a form of worship in Tibet, which is to carry a praying machine around through the streets and to stop at the doors to earn a penny. Apparently, they would go to the door and knock on the door, and that the individual inside would pay 1 penny and a prayer would be ground out. So you have this material mechanism, this machine, being contrasted with the divine principle, a divine living system, a divine mechanism. You have a dead mechanism compared to the mechanism of the science of life. She says, but the advance guard of progress, you see, those that spearhead progress, that within us that spearheads progress, has paid for the privilege of prayer the price of persecution.